The message was ancient, not in age, but in soul, laced with the desperation of a people who had tried everything else before daring to call to the stars. And though the galaxy was vast and cruel and broken, it still answered, or rather, one corner of it did. A blue, green planet, scarred by its own survival, heard the whisper in the void and paused. For the first time in a century and a half, Earth, united not by war but by memory, remembered what it had been like to scream and be unheard, remembered being prey not just to monsters with fangs, but to those wearing smiles, remembered what it was like to beg and watch the skies stay silent. So when the signal came, when the plea unfolded and burst, translated fragments and pain, they did not debate, they acted. And the message traveled down to the old war rooms and rose into orbit, where old commanders stared at the blinking distress icon and felt something ancient stir, something human. The Alvari were a peaceful race, never built for war, with wings like soft-spun glass and voices like music that calmed even predators. Their world bore no weapons and their leaders no armor, only silken robes and trembling hope as the Krekt descended with fire, with hooks and iron claws, to rip life out of beauty and turn it to ash. The Alvari sent out their last hope on a dying relay satellite, a whisper not meant for war, but for mercy. And what came instead was steel. It came from the dark edges of known space, first as signals, then as movement, then as mass. A fleet of ships black as midnight, and shaped like old earth beasts, not for terror, but for honor. For those lost who once cried into silence, humanity had remembered that pain. And now, they had sworn no one would face it alone. And so the fleet moved with intent, not for conquest, not for glory, but for justice and rage, dressed in armor and engine flame. The Krekt laughed when they saw the human ships. They called them hollow threats, toothless things, made by soft beings with no hunger for domination. They saw the fleet as decorative, a gesture too late and too kind for war. And so, they pushed harder, dragging Alvari children from temples and burning crystal cities to the roots. The Krekt did not know history. They did not know the weight of Terran scars, the billions dead in Earth's final wars, the reason humanity outlawed orbital bombardment except under highest command. And they certainly did not understand what the markings on the lead Terran dreadnought meant until it spoke. And it did not speak in galactic tongue. It spoke in the voice of a woman whose ancestors had been firebombed, whose father was vaporized in an orbital strike, and whose people had once promised never again. And that promise had just been invoked. And the Krekt laughed no longer. Because the humans did not argue, and they did not negotiate. They simply began to fall from the stars like judgment made flesh. The battle was not even that, not in the way the Krekt hoped for. There were no heroic duels, no cunning traps, only brutal precision and silence. Broken only by the scream of tearing metal and the crack of railguns, the Terran fleet moved as one living memory, an organism of vengeance and justice from a species that had once tried peace, and then buried its mercy when it was spat on. The Krekt flagship was bisected before it fired its third shot, and its sister ships found their command channels choked with noise, not interference, but names. Human names, etched into targeting programs, names of colonies lost, of children buried, of empires that had mocked Earth's cries and fallen in return. The Alvari watched in reverent horror, not at the death, but at the mourning within it. How every Terran missile bore insignia for the lost, how every gunship bore the name of a fallen city Earth had remembered, and in remembering had promised the stars no scream would go unanswered again. And the Krekt learned what it meant to be remembered by humans. When the fire faded and the last Krekt vessel was broken adrift, the Alvari descended to their shattered cities with hands trembling, not from fear but awe. They found human soldiers already there, not planting flags, but raising shelters, distributing food and medicine carried across light years with care and wrapped in vacuum. Tight plastic, marked with the emblem of Earth. Not a planet, not anymore, but a legacy. The Terrans did not ask for thanks, and they did not stay for songs. They worked with quiet reverence, restoring what they could. Planting flora scanned from Alvari data, trying to restore what was lost, or at least hold space for grief. And when the Alvari elder asked the human commander why they had come with such fury and force for a people they had never met, the reply was this: when we were young, we screamed into the dark, and no one came. Now we are the dark, and we will never let your scream go unheard. And the elder wept because it was not a threat, it was a vow. The galaxy watched, not with amusement as before, but with silence heavy and taut. The empires that once scoffed at the fractured Earth, now recalculated their maps not by resources or size, but by promise. For the humans had drawn a new line, not of territory, but of duty. A vow that echoed through all subspace that said, if you hurt them, we will come, and if you make them scream, we will answer. And if you come with claws, we will come with the weight of every scar we ever buried. And so the stars turned not toward the biggest empires, but toward the blue world at the edge of the Orion Arm, toward Earth, the planet of fire and promise and pain. And the children of that world stood tall in their ships, in their silence, and in their vow that no one would ever again be allowed to cry into the void alone. In the years that followed, no one forgot, not the Alvari, who rebuilt their crystal spires with Terran scaffolds, and filled their halls with songs that now included human names, nor the Krekt, whose remnants fled into the void, their war mothers whispering warnings of Earth, not as a myth, but as a force. And among the stars that once burned with cold judgment, there now pulsed a warmth unknown before. For humanity did not withdraw, they did not become tyrants. They became anchors, forging trade corridors seated with aid ships and peacekeepers, not to govern, but to guard. And wherever cries echoed across space, the answer came not just from Terran warships, but from Alvari, messengers from colonies that had once been terrified, but now lit their skies with Earth's colors, not out of fear, but memory. And when the first galactic child asked what Earth was, the answer was simple. Earth is the reason we are not alone. Earth is the voice that said, we hear you. And one day a new signal crossed the stars from a world unknown, its voice shaking with terror, and silence was its only answer for a moment. Then, like thunder folding through eternity, came the hum of Terran drives. And that child on that distant planet whispered through tears of awe they came. And somewhere in the oldest command bunker beneath the soil of old Earth, a commander marked another star with a golden light, and spoke the words etched into every Terran heart: if they scream, we answer; if they fall, we rise; if they call, we come. And across the galaxy, the stars exhaled as if they too had been holding their breath, and now finally knew what it meant to be heard.